Welcome to the Jboy Show, hosted by Jake Crain, the fastest growing sports show in the nation.
I'm Coach Hugh Freeze.
This is Super Bowl champion Brandon Graham.
Hey, this is DJ Shockley, and you're watching.
And thanks for watching the Jboy Show.
Hello, everybody, and thank you again for joining us. Got a great interview with Justin Hokanson of the new AuburnLive.com. Going to talk to him about that and about some of the landscape changing in college football, what Texas, Oklahoma brings. But first, before I get to my monologue, got to thank BetOnline.ag. You need to head over there right now. If you head over there, sign up, doesn't matter, mobile, desktop, laptop, you get a 50% welcome bonus. We've still got the Olympics going on. We got Major League Baseball, college football's around the corner. Anything you want to bet on, parlays, pleasers, teasers, team props, game props, player props, they're going to have it over there. And they've also got some early college football lines out. It is literally this month, people. You need to go over there and sign up right now while you can still get that bonus. It's betonline.ag. My monologue before we get to Hoke today is one I don't think enough people are talking about. In the coaching world, it's talked about a ton because right now, in my opinion, it's the worst rule in college sports. And it's that as a program, as an organization, even with the transfer portal, where guys have a one-time transfer rule where it's free to transfer, even in conference, from a conference school to a conference school, you can only intake 25 guys per year on scholarship. So what does that mean? Well, what do you say? Okay, all right, let's do the math here. So just for example, if I have 7 guys transfer out, I don't get all 7 of those numbers back. That's not how it works. And that's how it should work. That's the only way that it can work without really setting up the institution for problems, especially from a roster structure standpoint, because you get 25 to bring in, 25 scholarship guys to bring in. So let's say we get to signing day, not the early signing period. That's the actual signing period now. You have a signing period and a late signing period. Let's say that we get there and you sign 24 guys and you have 1 scholarship left over. And let's say that 5 guys on scholarship on your team transfer. You don't get those numbers back. You get 1 more. Do the math on that. It doesn't add up. It's a big problem right now. It's a rule that needs to be changed. It's like there's no yin to the yang. So that's something I can't believe it's not changed already. I'm guessing if we continue to go down this path of, the transfer summer of love where you can just transfer wherever with no repercussions or no penalties, it's really going to put some guys in a bind. You've heard coaches talk about it. And it's something that needs to be fixed quickly, because if it's not, you're going to hear the chirping get louder and louder and louder. To me, it's like sitting here and saying, okay, we're going to try and hold your roster hostage, even if it's a transfer of just playing time or something that, is not nefarious, or a guy didn't get in trouble, something that is not of your fault. Oh, well, we're not going to let you replace those numbers. So keep an eye on that. It's a rule that needs to be changed. I would be shocked if it doesn't get changed. But the 25 intake rule only from a scholarship standpoint, because you can only have 85 on the roster, talking about scholarship players at any given time, there should be no intake rule. It should be you have to get to 85, not 86. You can go to 84. Don't know why you would do that. But unless you're on some scholarship limitations from the NCAA, it makes no sense. And it puts the organization in a bind. So that's a rule that needs to be changed, and it needs to be changed quickly. I think they will. And again, just diving into the numbers, we talk about roster structure on here all the time. If you're sitting here wondering why the roster doesn't look nearly as good or looks imbalanced compared to where it was last year, I can go ahead and tell you there's a pretty good reason why. And most time it's going to be the same thing. The 25-a-year intake rule, it's terrible. It's trash. They need to throw it away. You can't have one without the other. Make sure you check us out, thejboyshow.com, the only place to win the water cooler. Got some big news coming. The Jboy Show family is growing. That's all I'm going to say for right now. Let's get to Justin Hokanson. All right, everybody, excited to get to Justin Hokanson, newest member of, I'm going to let him talk about it. I'm going to let him plug it. It's brand new, the On3 Auburn site. Hoke, number one, it's good to have you on. And real quickly, tell everybody about the new gig, man.
Yeah, man, On3 Network. On3 Sports Network. A lot of people in the industry know who Shannon Terry is. The same guy who started Rivals and 24/7 is now starting On3. Kind of his last venture to try to sort of build a a perfect one. Third time's a charm. So we're launching Auburn Live, which is a team site that'll be a part of that. Jeffrey Lee, who a lot of people know from auburnsports.com and Rivals, is coming over. Cole Pinkston, and myself getting back in it. And so it'll be a cool site, fun site for Auburn fans to obviously get daily happenings and insider stuff, recruiting information, and all that, community message board, and all that fun stuff that comes with it. So we think that there's a bright future in Auburn Live. Obviously, college athletics is crazy right now and changing. So why not launch a new site to go along with it?
Why not, man? Why not? But no, excited for you. Obviously, Cole came up through the minor leagues here at the Jboy Show, and excited to see the coaching tree grow there. But I want to get to Auburn, and obviously there's been some recruiting news as well. But Texas and Oklahoma, something me and you haven't had a chance to chat about on the show, being added to the SEC. I was there at Media Days when this news got dropped with Sankey literally on the floor. I thought either there was an assassination attempt or somebody declared war on us, the way that everybody reacted. Just your initial thoughts on Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, because I think they're going to come in next year, Hope.
Yeah. I'm kind of going back and forth on this. I mean, I think ultimately, if you look at where college football is going, then having as many good programs in your league is a good thing. I mean, if you're in the SEC and you're bringing in Oklahoma and Texas, if you're Auburn and you're bringing in Oklahoma and Texas, that's only going to make your conference stronger and, financially and exposure and all that good stuff, which helps you. Now, are you bringing in two great programs? Sure. I mean, and then now if you're Auburn and you're like, okay, Oklahoma's better than us, obviously, in football, but you're bringing in programs you got to compete with. Yeah. But I think the goal now is, man, put yourself in your conference in a really good position as college football and college basketball, as everything changes. And so if the SEC is in a good spot, then Auburn's in a good spot, or anybody else in the league, to me, is in a good spot. So I think A&M is probably the only school that I get a little bit of their frustration and not, they want the SEC to themselves. I get it. But I think everybody else is probably happy that they're coming. It'll strengthen the conference. There might be some programs in the middle of the league right now that are probably maybe a little worried. I mean, think about Tennessee, think about Missouri trying to make a move. Think about Kentucky trying to make a move. I think about some of these programs kind of in that 8, 9, 7 spot that you bring in Oklahoma and Texas, and, where does that put them, especially as they're trying to rise? Makes it a little bit tougher, but I think it's a good thing for the conference, ultimately.
Yeah, and when you look at the playoffs expanding to 12, and there's more at-large bids, strength of schedule we know is a big deal, and factors at the end when you're trying to maybe sneak in there to get a chance at the playoff. But, when you look at the future just of college football, it looks to me like we're heading the super conference route. As we've talked about here on the show, I expect mergers to happen. The most interesting thing to me, though, that I'm watching is Notre Dame, because they have that NBC contract dangling out there, and we know how powerful the SEC network is. The Longhorn network is going to fold and basically go underneath the SEC network. They're going to soup that thing up. What do you see for a school like Notre Dame that wants to stay independent? We know they want to stay independent. I think the NBC contract goes to like 2036 or something like that. But we all know things can get bought out and things can change. What do you see for the Fighting Irish?
Well, that's a good question. I would not consider myself an expert on all this, but I can't imagine I would have to think their days as an independent are coming to an end. I mean, they've got to jump on board somewhere. I mean, it's just, that's the way things are going. I mean, it's just, they can't just continue to dangle out there, I don't think, by themselves. I just don't see how that's going to work when you have a couple of conferences that are 16 or 20 teams deep, and then you got Notre Dame by themselves or something. I mean, that would make no sense at all. I mean, they're going to have to get involved somewhere. And I think conferences, at some point, are going to probably, I would think, pressure them and say, hey, look, y'all got to join somewhere. Yeah. I mean, we all got these loaded up conferences, and what are you going to do? Pick and choose Stanford and Purdue and all that again? I mean, so I think they got to jump on board somewhere. And then when they do, that'll be really crazy to see what happens. Obviously, the NBC contract they always have, and kind of them being able to say we're independent in that Notre Dame cloud. It would be really interesting once they do finally join a conference. Like, who do they join? And, how do they kind of mesh into that league? What happens to the Notre Dame mystique? Does it change at all if they're in a conference and not on their own anymore? I think that'd be really, really cool to watch. Who knows? It could help them if they get to in a big time conference and create some natural rivalries. Maybe it helps them, but they got to join somewhere sometime.
Yeah, I loved him in the ACC. I thought that was great. The matchups with Clemson and looking forward. And you look at it, the SEC probably going to at least a 9-game conference schedule. If we're adding Oklahoma and Texas, I'm not scheduling Notre Dame in the out of conference games. I'm not doing it. I'm really not scheduling anybody that's any good. That's my kind of one worry. But I guess if you look at it, if you add so many teams in one good conference, you're going to get a ton of good games anyway. So I guess you could look one hand, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. But I think it's the biggest controversy at Notre Dame since Rudy was offsides on those sacks and they didn't call it, which we all know he was offsides if you go back and look. But Hoke, kind of focusing in on Auburn and looking at the recruiting kind of landscape. They land Caden Story, 4-star defensive lineman from Lynette, a player with a ton of upside, not playing at a huge school, but if you look at his ability to move, I mean, even some of the offensive clips, the way he's able to get in and out of breaks, I think he has a chance to be a special player. They add Damari Alston as well, looking like Jacoby Albert could be coming down the pipe too. What do you think about Brian Harsin and the momentum that Auburn has in recruiting right now?
Well, it's good. I mean, obviously, it'd be really, really awesome for them to have a little momentum going into the season, much needed. Yep. They definitely had a lull there, which got a lot of fans worried, a lot of angst going on. You look at Caden Story, a lot of potential, big body. Alston, really well-built kid, certainly has the body to play in the SEC. It's some good momentum at a good time for them. And then it'll just be getting to the season and make it happen. And I would wonder, I would be curious to know if, how much was planned, how much of this was orchestrated to build the momentum and how much just kind of worked out that way. I think we'll know more about kind of how that staff operates in terms of playing those games as we go. But if it's all orchestrated by them to build momentum and fans are over there worrying and wringing their hands and they're behind the scenes going, well, look, you're going to commit here and you're going to do this and then you're going to commit there and then we're going to roll in the season. Well, they're over there doing some smart things and everybody's worried. So I think it would be good to have a few commits going into the season, get your numbers up a little bit and add some recruiters. So then when you start the season, you start official visits, you got some guys in your back pocket that now can recruit these uncommitted guys. I mean, if you only have 3 or 4 guys, it's tough. The more guys you got committed, now that's more recruiters you got in your bag. Look at what Damari Alston's doing, very, very vocal. So I think it's big on a lot of fronts to get that going.
Yeah, and look, you know how it is, Hoke. Staffs orchestrate this on purpose. Silent commits are a real thing. Another guy, and I want to get to fall camp and look at some of these SEC storylines early in the season because it's coming. I mean, we got football this month, Hoke. I mean, literally the end of this month, we're going to be playing football. Darius Clemens, 4-star wide receiver out of Portland, Oregon, dropped the top 3, Auburn, Penn State, Oregon. I think you can push Penn State to the side. You look at NIL with Oregon and Nike. That's always scary, especially a kid being from Portland. I feel like the official visit's huge here. These kids want to see this new offense and how it looks. And if I think it looks good, I think Auburn's got a good chance to land him.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, that kid, he's getting a lot of attention, rightly so. I mean, he could end up being kind of the gem of the class. He could end up being that guy that Harsin and the staff hang their hat on as far as going to Oregon, using those connections they had previously, taking a kid from Oregon out of their backyard to Auburn. That'd be a big deal. That'd be a big deal to do that. It would, I think, make a lot of fans feel good about the relationships they can build and their ability to pull a kid across the country. I mean, that's Oregon with NIL and being a receiver. It's right there in your backyard. It's hard to turn down that to come all the way to Auburn. So if they're able to pull that off, that would be huge. And I think it would say a lot about the relationship and that they're able to build with that kid. But yeah, I think the official visit's going to be big. He knows about Oregon. It's what can Auburn offer him, both from an NIL standpoint and an offense standpoint. And I think that's going to be big for a lot of kids this year. Who knows? I mean, you got Penn State game 3 and you got to get in there and see what the heck happens. And all these kids are hearing a lot of talk, but until the ball's played, they don't know. So if you can go out there and prove a few things and show a few things, put a few things on tape, and then go, hey, you don't necessarily have to win, but you show a good atmosphere and you show on tape, hey, look, this is how we're going to use you. We just need you. We need, just tell them, hey, we need you and we'll be fine. Yeah. I mean, that's huge.
And if you look at that wide receiver room, I mean, there's some young talent in there, but there's not a ton of veteran guys. You got to worry about having to beat out 3 or 4 guys at one spot that have played 2 or 3 years in the SEC, been 2 or 3 years in a strength and conditioning program. And going into fall camp, looking at Auburn first, what are some storylines that you're looking at offensively and defensively as the season approaches and they get ready for Akron week 1?
Well, I mean, I'm super intrigued to see how TJ Finley does. I think we most people expect Bo Nix to be the guy. I think we're all just curious what TJ Finley looks like. Could he actually push him at all? What are the impressions that we hear from practice and how good is he? I'm just super intrigued to hear, kind of how he progresses. I think there should be some attention on the running back position behind Tank Bigsby. I think in the SEC, Tank's awesome, but in the SEC, you have to have more than one. And so I'm super curious to see how Jarquez Hunter does. He's a well-built kid that, could be somebody to keep an eye on. Maybe he can get some carries in conference play and get to that point where if he develops really quickly and you have a guy that spells Tank, that's a big development. I think you're looking at DB. Gosh, it's like it's wide open. I mean, it's like the wild, wild west. I mean, you have Smoke Monday, and you have Roger McCreary, who I think are kind of locked in. But everybody else, I mean, you got a lot of different athletes. You got a couple of guys that have transferred in, a lot of guys that want to play right now. And so I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that all shakes out. What kind of secondary Auburn can build could be a good one. And then probably past that, I would go defensive tackle. I'm very much a wait and see kind of person. I want to see a crew or a player show me before I just say that they're going to be great or good. Defensive line, defensive tackle specifically is a huge deal. That position, you got Tyrone Truesdale back, who's got some experience. Colby Wooden is a budding star. Zacchaeus Walker's a budding star. But what is Tony Fair? What kind of contribution does he make? What does Lee Hunter do? What kind of development does he have? I think that defensive tackle position is massive for a few players, and how quickly can they develop? Because if that's a weakness, Auburn's got good linebackers, but if your tackles aren't doing their job, then the linebackers are negated a lot. So I think that defensive tackle position is huge. If they could figure that out, that defense is actually going to be really good. But that tackle position, they've got to be better than they were last year.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's a place they really struggled rushing the passer as well. Interested to see JJ Pegues, another guy that moved over there. I still think we're going to see him in some goal line situations on offense. I would not be shocked at all. You talk about Jarquez Hunter, guy we've talked about a ton on this show. I mean, the dude can deadlift a village full of children already. He's built to play running back in the SEC. And I always say, if you watch his tape, it looks like he's running funny. Not that he's not running fast. It's hard to tackle guys that run funny. Michael Dyer ran really funny. It's just hard to tackle. Trey Mason, even. If you looked the way Trey ran, it was a little bit different than everybody else. You're not used to squaring guys like that up. So I'm interested to see that. Then you look, obviously, in that defensive backfield, Drayshawn Miller's a guy I know they're very high on at corner by Darius Knight in the SEMO transfer. Donovan Kaufman coming from that Vanderbilt system under Derek Mason, I think is a plug-and-play guy. Definitely, they can play both safety spots and the nickel. So it's going to be interesting. And Hoke, just a few more. We're here with Justin Hokanson, brand new on Auburn Live. I'm going to let him again plug that before we get him out of here. But looking at the schedule again, look, and there's I don't like saying cupcakes, but Auburn should beat Akron. They should beat Alcorn State. Then you get Penn State up there in Happy Valley. It's supposed to be a whiteout. We all know, we got to wait to the season. I don't want to jinx it. I don't even want to say it because I don't want to jinx it. Is that week 3 game the springboard game that will dictate a lot of it? And I hate saying one game's going to dictate the whole season, but Auburn's going to need some momentum against a real opponent. And I mean, what a better opportunity than to go play a Penn State team that struggled last year in an environment that if you can win, should give you a whole hell of a lot of confidence. You got to come back against LSU and Georgia after Georgia State.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big game. I hate to put too much on it. I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's a good, valuable opportunity for Auburn and the staff. They can go on the road and have an SEC atmosphere without it being an SEC game. So to me, that's a positive. They can go on the road and they're going to get as tough as it's going to get before league play even starts. I think that's good for the players. That's good. So I think there's a bunch of good stuff, win or lose, that could come out of that game, barring a blowout. Right? That's really bad. But I think there's a lot of positives that could come out of it. You think back to 2013 and Auburn losing that game at LSU. They lost the game, but the second half, the way that game went, they ran the ball all over LSU. They got down there, had a turnover. They could have scored nearly 30 points in the second half of that game, and they left losing, but they left with confidence. They were like, well, hold on, we found something. And you saw what happened the rest of the season. So there are those things that can happen in that kind of early game. It's a big game, though, when you look at the schedule, because right after that, you've got, they've got LSU on the road there coming up. In that same sort of stretch, you have LSU on the road, you have Georgia at home. So if you don't get Penn State, and then you go on the road to LSU and don't win, now Georgia's at home. Now, I think they have maybe Arkansas in there. So there's one other conference game in there. But point is, if you lose to Penn State, you have at LSU and you have Georgia at home. So you could be looking at, in that stretch, you could be looking at 1 and 2 in the conference, 1 and 3 in that stretch if you don't get Penn State. So it's a big game. If they were able to pull it out, it'd be really, really big, because right after that, 2 of the next 3 games are massive. So it's going to be really intriguing to see what happens and what comes out of that game.
Yeah, without a doubt. And again, going into this season, you actually got a spring, actually got a summer. I think you're going to see the defenses play a little bit better than they did last year, not only because of that, but you look at what Florida lost offensively, what Alabama lost offensively, A&M losing Mond, even though the Haynes King kid is a witch to me. I think he's going to be the starter at the end of the day. But Hoke, my last question for you, and I think it's a really interesting one, especially from an Auburn perspective. Who will be a bigger rival to Auburn, Texas or Oklahoma? The floor is yours, Justin.
Oh, boy.
It's a saucy one. I know it's a saucy one. Let it soak for a second.
I don't know. Obviously Texas and Auburn have a little bit of history. Mm-hmm. Going back to the 80s. Recently, they played in the Sugar Bowl. Auburn had no business being in that game in the first place. Yep. In 2016, they were 8-4, but the SEC wasn't any good, and Auburn got smoked. I don't know. I think I would probably lean Texas. It feels like that's more of maybe a natural, inclination for Auburn fans to have a rivalry with. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma seems like they're destined to butt heads with Alabama a bunch. And so I feel like from an Auburn fan perspective, I feel like Texas is going to probably ring true as a rival more than Oklahoma will. Maybe just because some of that, a little bit of that history in the 80s and stuff like that. So I would say Texas. I think that's gonna feel more like a rivalry than Oklahoma with Auburn.
I agree with you, and I'm interested to see the Auburn fan base and the Texas fan base, because Texas is not afraid to tell you how good they think they are, and I know how Auburn fans feel about that. And again, with Texas, I guess. Go ahead.
You got Auburn already plays Georgia every year, so what's the difference?
That's true. That is Justin Hokanson, ladies and gentlemen. But Hoke, man, again, congrats on the new gig. Tell everybody where they can find it, man. I'm excited for you. Obviously, going to have you on here a lot. I know we're do some collaborating as well. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, man. AuburnLive.com. We should launch, any day. So just sort of stay tuned and keep an eye on Twitter and we'll get going. Look forward to being on your show to talk Auburn, and we'll have you on and talk big picture college football stuff and all that good stuff. So looking forward to it.
Well, Justin, it's always good, my friend. I appreciate it. Stay safe out there. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Go to the jboyshow.com and grab some merch, and stay tuned. We got a really big announcement coming. All right, everybody, let's get Cole Cubelic in here from ESPN, the SEC Network. Also co-host of Mac and Cube. Great new show on Jocks. Definitely check that out. I'm sure a lot of you have. Cole, I appreciate you taking some time. I know you're a busy man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Definitely. Well, let's hop right in. Look, I couldn't get you in here and get you out of here without asking you about Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. Obviously, looking at it from the SEC vantage point, it's a huge move and a smart move, at least in my opinion. Just your initial thoughts on both of those teams joining the conference and kind of what it means, and is it foreshadowing for what's coming?
I think most likely it is. It's obviously a wow move when you think about the power of those two brands coming into what we all believe is already the best college football conference in America. And not just football. You think about what Oklahoma and Texas will add From a basketball perspective, more so Oklahoma right now. Texas won the Big 12 last year, but then Oklahoma in softball, 3 of the last 5 national championships. Texas has been to more College World Series than any team in history. Gymnastics is something that is going to be ramped up a little bit. Texas volleyball, something competitive in the national championship hunt on an annual basis. And you bring 2 very passionate, rabid fan bases, which I think obviously are something that we're used to and accustomed to in the Southeastern Conference. And I don't think geography and eyeballs and TV market were at the forefront of this like the last expansion was when it was Texas A&M and Missouri. But I do think now you get into the Oklahoma market, you bring in Oklahoma City, which is valuable, and a little bit more Texas, which obviously is still valuable. So I think it's a massive move. It's one of the biggest moves in the history of college football. We don't know where this is going to end. And I think I think there are 2 gigantic questions now left in college football. One, when does this end? When does the dust settle? When do we sort of sit back and sigh and say, okay, we can exhale. This is what college football is going to look like for the next 10, 15 years and feel good about that. The second biggest question, I think, as it pertains to the future of college football is what will be next for the group of 5, the next 5, Division 6, the other guys, whatever you want to call them. Because I think that if these conferences are going that direction, then you're going to have to find a way to generate revenue in a manner that is sustainable for the foreseeable future. And that's going to include your regular season and your postseason. Because now if we're going to 3, 4 mega super conferences, whatever, hell, even 2, then you're not going to be able to just sit there and sip on the bottle of these conferences anymore.
Yeah.
They're not handing you that formula every night. It's not going to work. So you got to find a way to go generate revenue on your own. Is that a 24-team playoff, 16-team playoff? Is that, do you merge conferences? I don't know exactly how you do it. I think we would all watch it. I mean, hell, think about last year. A group of 5 playoff last year with Louisiana and Liberty and BYU.
Coastal.
Coastal. We would have all been in on that. I would have watched that. I would have loved to have watched that. It would have been good football. So I think that those are the 2 big questions as it pertains to the future of college football that I have. And the unfortunate part, Jake, is we don't know.
Yeah.
We can't sit there and say, well, 2026, we'll have it figured out, or 2032, we'll know what's going on. There's no telling when this thing will finally settle down.
Without a doubt. And Cole, it's amazing just looking at this year alone in college football. And I'm sure, 10, 15, 20 years, 100 years, they'll look back. Hopefully everybody's still here, but 100 years, they'll look back and say 2021 was the most seismic movement in college athletics ever. I mean, NIL, the transfer portal, expanding the playoff, doing all this and that. I do got to ask you this. Something I find really interesting is the Texas part saying, oh, well, now Texas will have an even bigger recruiting advantage now that they're in the SEC. I get that kids could stay home in Texas and play in the SEC at A&M, and that's a big deal. But does Texas already not have one of the biggest recruiting advantages in the country already?
I would think so, with the kind of revenue that they bring in and that they generate. But I do think slapping that logo next to your name does add inherent advantages. And the easiest reason to see that is just Texas A&M in and of itself. And you go look at the billboards, you go look at the recruiting letters, the paraphernalia when they first came into the league. I mean, they put that SEC logo the exact same size as the A&M logo and everything that they pushed out. Don't think Texas and Oklahoma are not going to be doing very similar things. They'd be foolish not to do those kind of things. So I think what it will do is probably expand the footprint that Texas is able to have success recruiting. We know they're going to recruit Texas, and they should. And they should get wins in Louisiana, and they should get wins in Oklahoma, and probably wins in California. But now going into the Southeast is where I think you may see Texas have some more success. I mean, who's the last great player from the state of Alabama that played at Texas? Hell, I can't name one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think right now.
I don't know a single damn football player from the state of Alabama, and I've lived in the state of Alabama every day of my life, and I don't know one that went and played at Texas. Zero. Absolutely zero. I mean, Mississippi, I couldn't give you a handful. Georgia, I don't know a bunch.
Yeah.
Obviously, they've had some kids from Florida. So I think that right there will show you that they may be able to move into Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, and do a little bit more damage because that's where the best recruits are every year. So if they can up the ante there a little bit more, then yes, I do think inherently their footprint and their recruiting success will improve.
Yeah, well, too, I mean, on the inverse of that too, Cole, maybe it'll stop Alabama from going out there and snatching every player they want out of Texas. If you look lately, and Denver Harris is going to be another one this year, one of the top guys out of Texas. Yeah. But, Cole, and we're here with Cole Cubelic, co-host of Mac and Cube, great show on Jocks, WJOX. Make sure you check that out. Also, ESPN, the SEC Network. Cole, before I get you out of here, a couple more questions. One, let's stand still in time for a second. The 16 teams that we have are going to have in the SEC. When you look at the way they should be split, are you a fan of pods? Are you a fan of divisions? Or do you think they should do it just like they do in basketball in the SEC?
I would be more a fan of pods because I think that would give you most likely 3 annual games that you knew you were going to play. So that would keep some familiarity, and it would obviously be able to sustain some of the rivalries that we love. Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Auburn, Alabama. So I think, and even some of the newer rivalries, I mean, A&M LSU has been really good the last few years. And I think that's one that both of those schools would want to keep going. LSU would be one of the schools that I think would have a massive headache with that, because LSU Florida has been incredible the last few years on and off the field. You obviously know that you don't want to get rid of Alabama LSU. Can't get rid of that game. I mean, the ratings are too damn good. You got to have that one. So, and then LSU Arkansas is like, I mean, that's a Friday after Thanksgiving staple. So there's 3. You're telling me you're not going to play LSU Texas every year?
Yeah.
Or LSU Oklahoma every year? So some 3 might not even be enough, but I think that would at least give you 3 games that you knew you were going to play every year, and then you would rotate around the rest of the league. I think it will go up a conference game annually, just because when you have that many teams, you want that inventory for yourself. You want to keep that revenue for yourself. It only makes sense to say, hey, man, if we're paying you $70 million a year, we don't want you playing Citadel and South Alabama and Rice. Like, we want you playing the teams in our league. Let's generate money for ourselves. So I think the pod system is probably what would work best. I think divisions would be tough to pull off. And then I think if you went divisions, I mean, we get people that can play now, and I kind of don't understand. I mean, I'm not really one that's for this, but, we get these people that say, oh, I'm a Georgia fan, and I hadn't been to Starkville in 19 years. Like, who cares? Like, I don't know, so what? When I signed up to play in the SEC, it was way down my list of priorities to play in every SEC stadium. Like, yeah, it would have been nice, but I mean, I wasn't looking at the calendar saying, when do we get to go to Nashville?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that wasn't a real thing. So I think if you went divisions, it's going to be so rare when you played some of those other teams in the opposite division that the league wouldn't want that. Pod system, you get rotation. You get a couple of consistent opponents, and probably going to end up being the best way to manage it moving forward.
Yeah, I think, too, the way they do it in basketball, I think you could still have those 3 mainstays to be able to rotate and get it pretty even through 4 years. But again, Cole, you're right. I mean, I'm looking right now at some of these rivalries that are going to be set up that, may have been in the past. I mean, look at Texas A&M. We all know, Oklahoma, Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, with those 2 fan bases. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But my last question you brought up.
Who are your 3 games for Texas? Think about that.
Man.
LSU would be tough. Bama's going to be tough. Texas may be the most difficult because A&M has got to be one.
Got to be. They've got to renew that.
Texas, Oklahoma, you're not getting rid of that game.
Yeah,
there's 2 that are gone right there. So they get 1 more game. So you got Arkansas, which Southwest Conference makes sense. Mm-hmm. You got LSU. You got Alabama. I mean, I don't know where you go there. That's tough.
That's tough, man. Just give me the spreadsheet. What do the numbers say? I guarantee you that's what they're going to be looking at. But Cole, last question. I'm going to let you run. Miles Brennan, obviously you bring up LSU. And, not how he got hurt, this, that, and the other. But to me, the biggest thing this does is it kind of handcuffs the play caller a little bit in Jay Pete's out there and his ability to say, well, we can move Max around. We can run him a little bit. Well, now we don't have a backup outside of a young guy. Does that kind of curtail the play calling and maybe close some of the pantry doors in the kitchen, especially in the red zone?
I think it could neutralize it a little bit, and I do think that Max has better wheels than people give him credit for. But I think now, listen, I can't make the argument about depth, and we've seen so many different quarterbacks go down for a series, a half, 2 or 3 games, the rest of the season. LSU was in a really good spot from a depth perspective going in, maybe the best in the country as far as just quarterback depth, having 2 guys that have played and played well, and we know what their skill set is. I can't say that that's going to be any sort of a benefit, but I do look at it a little bit as to, like, let's take Georgia from last year.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a transfer from Wake Forest, and Jamie Newman comes in, and he goes all summer, and then he goes to go with summer fall camp, and then 2 weeks before the season, he decides to leave. Well, you know, like I know, what he did there that a lot of people don't look at is he stole 3 months of first-team reps.
That's exactly right.
They're gone. You don't have those anymore. Well, the advantage that I think Pete's, and LSU and Max Johnson now have is this is your guy. He gets 95% of the first team reps. You build 95% of the offense around what he does well, how he can succeed, what he likes, and you subtract the things that maybe were better for Miles that Max not have been able to succeed with as much. So now you know exactly what you are going into this season. You don't have to divide the reps. Again, competition obviously helps make people better. That part of would have been nice, but outside of depth, I actually think this could end up being an advantage for LSU because now Max is the dude. He can assert himself in every single way possible going into this football season as the quarterback at LSU. And I think he's got the personality that those guys will gravitate to. I thought he was going to win it anyway. Adam was one of my top 5 quarterbacks going into the season. So I think other than depth, this actually has a chance to work out as a real positive for LSU.
Yeah, especially if he stays healthy. You talk about not only the playbook, but chemistry with those wide receivers. Now they can really not have to worry about, all right, well, the ball spins different coming out of Max's hands than it does out of Miles, one being a righty, one being a lefty, even though we know the way those lefty balls drift, pretty interesting, especially the punters used to have a problem with that with returners. But Cole, appreciate your time as always. Know you're a busy man. Tell everybody where and when they can find Mac and Cube. You guys are doing a hell of a job over there.
Yeah, 7 to 10 a.m. on joxfm.com, joxfm.com. That's 7 to 10 a.m. Central, or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Just search for that. Like it, rate it, review it, watch it, listen to it. We appreciate it.
Definitely, Cole. We appreciate you coming on, brother. Let's do this again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. We appreciate you guys as well. Make sure you check us out at jboyshow.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Twitter as well. It's been another edition of the Jboy Show. And like Max Johnson on the RPO or the zone read, we're going, gone.
The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, Technical Director Dave Hammock, Creative Director David Culbertson, Audio Engineer Feyzan Shareef, Production Assistants Blain, Crain, and Kyle Orr, Executive Producers Jake Crain, Vince Thompson, Steve Chamberlain, and David Cohn. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, thejboyshow.com, for updates regarding our newest apparel and merch designs. Win the water cooler with the Jboy Show.